All right, welcome back to Resilient Voices and Beyond. I'm so excited for today's episode 30 of season 2. We are pushing it and knocking down the grind. But you guys all know, before I get started, I have to extend my gratitude and appreciation to everyone that is, helping me and supporting me by liking, by sharing, by rating, and all that you guys do. I've been doing a little push on some of my social media platforms, especially YouTube, to get to 100 subscribers, and you guys have not failed to help me out and support me each and every day. I've been posting with that, so thank you so much. If you so happen to have stumbled across this podcast and don't know who I am, my name is Michael D. Davis Thomas, aka MDDTSpeaks. I spent a little bit over 11 years in the Michigan child welfare system, part of that being on the juvenile justice side, and then the second half of that being on the foster care side. Ended up aging out, working in child welfare, doing juvenile corrections, and then doing congregate care work, doing everything from actually been a youth care worker to also doing some policy and programming and housing coordinating for several nonprofits and nationally and locally with state policy, and just continuing to do the advocacy. So I've been in this realm for a little bit of time in my short time of life. I have a lot of experience, and I just want to translate that experience onto here to help educate more people and get more support around what true child welfare looks like and what is the real about foster care, and help people understand a little bit more. Without further ado, that's me. You guys know I can talk. I'm gonna have my guest introduce herself.
Hey, so good afternoon. My name is Felisha Burleson. So Michael, hearing you talk, sounds like we have some things in common. So I did spend, I guess, a relatively short period of my life in foster care compared to a lot of other people. Now that I'm networking and hearing other people share their stories, my stint wasn't that long. But after leaving foster care, I have done some advocacy work, some policy work. I've worked in the child welfare system in a few different capacities. And so, now I'm here. I think I just want to talk about, some of the lessons I've learned personally throughout my journey, some of the things that I've learned, just on each different side of things that I performed as somebody who experienced the system, somebody who's worked for the system, somebody who wants to transform the system, and even somebody who wants to transform families. So then maybe we don't even have to have some of these same experiences in the first place. Or if we do have these experiences or these encounters, what do we do? Kind of how do we navigate this so that, we won't have these bad outcomes, and so that our families can heal and become better for the children that we have.
Definitely, I appreciate that, and I couldn't have said it any better. I'm so excited for today's episode. You may have listened to some before. If not, that's cool. But the audience always know. My first initial question is to get some background on you. We love to talk about the expertise and everything, but I like to let my audience get to know the person before we get into the expertise. So they can better listen to the expertise and know that it's coming from someone that they can trust.
Yeah.
So my first initial question is, share to whatever extent you're comfortable with, when did your story begin, and help us build a timeline to your now.
Yeah. So I'll say this. My story is kind of long. I'm not that old, but the story is kind of long. So I officially went into foster care on October 19, 2004. So that was the day before my 15th birthday. But my family had different types of involvement and different types of investigations just throughout my lifestyle. Throughout my life. So I think one of my first investigations I remember was in like first grade. And so in Texas, our investigations are a little bit different. There are different kind of findings. And so basically at that point with those different types of investigations, my parents weren't at, such a bad point in their life that they couldn't be that we needed grounds for removal. It was something like, hey, if you just resolve this, or if you just resolve that area, or if you fix this. But the thing about it is the fixes never really stayed. It never stuck. It was kind of like, I'm gonna put some tape on it and put some duct tape on it and it's gonna be good. But it wasn't like the waterproof duct tape. Okay. So you're trying to put duct tape on a leaking boat, and it may not necessarily work. Okay. And so, eventually it's coming off until it becomes undone. And so for us, everything kind of came undone in 2004. And I try to share, in a way that I'm sharing my story, but not necessarily telling everybody else's business, because some parts are other people's stories to tell. And so, but with that being said, myself and my two younger siblings went into the child welfare system the day before I turned 15, and my mom was in prison and we were with my dad. With that being said, I've done foster care traditional, I've done shelters or group homes, I've done, and I've also done kinship care. And so for me, there became a point when I was in kinship care, and I ultimately decided to go back to foster care system, because I didn't even think that kinship care placement was the best solution for me. Now, as an adult and as a professional, I know that kinship a lot of times can be the best situation and environments for children. And I say that as somebody who's worked in the system, somebody who's educated and know the science and research. But for me at that time, I chose to return back to the foster care system. And so I was only there for 3 years. Like I said, I was there from 15 to a little bit after 18, but that time taught me so much, not even as much of the lessons that I had about myself, but I learned so much about other people, and, you know, just even with my foster sisters and my foster cousins and people that I encountered, and seeing like some of their experiences, seeing what their parents went through with trying to get them back, and, you know, things like that. Because even my mom, technically, we were never removed from her. Her rights were never terminated. She just went to prison. And they were like, hey, in Texas, your case can only be open for a year. So, you know, your rights aren't terminated, but we have to place them somewhere else. But, you know, just even navigating and seeing what that looks like. How do you get your kids back? You know, what does that even mean? So definitely, like I said, a lot of my life lessons have come from me watching other people and learning from them what to do, what not to do, or, you know, what if they would have taken a different route, or what if somebody else would have been more supportive for them? Kind of what would their outcomes, or what would their children's outcomes look like? How much of that trauma could we have reduced just by even taking a different step?
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that. And it's crazy. Well, not crazy, but well, yeah, for lack of better words. For me, it's crazy because I've been doing a lot of research lately, in my not being able to sleep. Like waking up, going on LinkedIn, doing a little research and looking at stuff. And it's been a lot around trauma. It's been a lot around generational trauma, the cycle of it, like, and how it all unravels, how racism intertwines with it, how what was the other one? It talked about like helplessness, you know, how racism, you know, it didn't come to me, but it talked about a variety of different things, and I've really been trying to dive deep because, granted, like, you know, I'm not a psychologist, therapist, or anything like that, but, you know, knowledge is at the door, and it's only waiting for you to open it, you know, so I'm always seeking to learn more and to be better, you know, whether in conversation or just in know-how. So for me, as I'm continuing this journey with, you know, the rest of my family, it's important for me to understand why they do what they do. I may not get direct answers from them, but I can understand from, you know, the books, you know,
Yep.
from, you know, the data to help me, like, okay, they're not going to tell me, but at least I can look at, okay, this is historically, I know I'm not the only person going through this, you know. I know it may not look the same, but dysfunctionality has hit, you know, biopic communities, you know, all over. So with that being said, because you spoke about it slightly, you know, how has that journey been for you, and understanding that and setting apart yourself from that cycle?
Yes. So you know what? I just knew that that's what I was supposed to come talk about. So that's literally what I researched. This is my stuff. So So that's actually how I got into looking at trauma anyway. So I've worked in mental health and other, other capacities and things like that. And so I was learning about trauma and intergenerational trauma. So a lot of times they talk about it like with POWs, like prisoners of war, and, people who experience the Holocaust, but it's real in other systems and other families. And so I was like, okay, I need the tea. I need to know what's going on. And so I started reading and I started researching, so that's literally what I'm researching right now. So when I get to my dissertation, I'm literally researching intergenerational trauma, but that's because I care about it. My life and my family, all that stuff has led me to where I'm at, because I want to know how the things my grandma did and my mom did impact me and how it's going to impact my daughter, right? So we have lots of different types of intergenerational trauma, because I have that within my family. And then I also have systematic intergenerational trauma. And a lot of people who are in the system who work there, they hear about trauma-informed care and things like that, but they don't really know how to do it. So it's just like, well, if you cared about your kids, you just stop doing drugs. No, that's not how addiction works. Or it's well, I'm not sure why you parent this way. But a lot of times our parenting behaviors are transferred intergenerationally. And so you have to be able to say, first of all, you have to be a person that's done the work or are doing the work in order to mitigate that trauma. So I know that there are some people who can do it on their own. A lot of people can't. So a lot of times some of us go to therapists, we go to coaches, and we work through that. And we're like, hey, these are my experiences. How do I turn a new leaf? And it's a lot of work, but also a part of that turning the new leaf is going back and seeing what happened to what got you here in the first place. And it's, like I said, it's so much stuff that's intertwined, because, being at a place to say like, hey, I know that the people that raised me or the people that I was with, they weren't the best, but maybe they were doing the best for the situation and circumstances that they could. So I have to take that and also know, what can I do to be even better for myself and my child? Because my generational curse, because in religion it's called generational curses, and then in the traditional world or in psychology it's called that intergenerational trauma. But I know that my curse or my intergenerational trauma isn't broken until I get to my daughter's kids, because the proof is going to be in the pudding in the way that I parent her. And I'd be definitely lying if I say that it's easy, but no, it's a lot of work to do. And so it's kind of like, if you look online right now, everybody's talking about gentle parenting. They're like, I'm trying to gentle parent my kids, but my kids aren't gentle. One, we aren't used to gentle parenting. We weren't gentle parented.
No, I don't even know what that is. Like,
it's a completely, I'll give you an example in just a second. It's a completely different mindset of the way that you talk to and speak to your children. If you went to work tomorrow and your boss said, sit down, shut up, and get on the phone, you'd be like, who are you talking to, right? But a lot of times we tell our kids, go to school, sit down, and shut up, and come home. And so we weren't parented that way. No. And the other thing is, unless you start off gentle parenting with your children, they're not going to necessarily respond in that same way. So for example, my daughter is 14. Which this is it's a pretty new concept, that concept specifically, or that term specifically, but it's not necessarily new in treating your children in a specific way. But if I didn't already have a foundation, she would think it was odd, like I was speaking a foreign language. So that's why people are like, I'm trying to gentle parent, but these kids aren't gentling. That's why you're starting a whole new system of behaviors for you, and they have to adapt to those behaviors as well.
Yeah.
But with that being said, that's becoming a part of the norm for our generation to parent our children that way. And it wasn't like that. Our parents come from a lot of our parents, especially in BIPOC communities, are parented in a harsh way. It's, we have to parent our children in ways that other people don't have to socialize their children. And sometimes it is much more harsh, and sometimes it is much more hard. And a lot of people come from the background and the perspective of, I have to be hard on my kids because I want them to be prepared for the world when the world is hard for them. And let
me pause you right there, because you just hit something. You just hit something. But before I ask you this first question, because I'm on the same wavelength of you, but I want to make sure my audience understand. So we're talking about intergenerational trauma,
Yes.
and stuff like that. I want to give you guys the definition, and you can help me with this definition if there's more to it.
Okay, cool.
The impact, intergenerational trauma is the impact of a traumatic experience, not only on one generation, but on subsequently generations after the event. It's also referenced to as transgenerational trauma. Some traumatic events that may lead to intergenerational trauma is parental incarceration, or substance abuse disorder, domestic violence, child abuse, natural disaster, historical events. Some symptoms could be denial, depersonalization, isolation, memory loss, nightmares, psychic numbing, hypervigilance, substance abuse, identification with death, unresolved grief. So that's a lot.
That's
a lot. And I was telling you before, like when I was doing research, so it took me here, and from there it took me to what is parentification, and then from what is parentification, it took me to what is learned helplessness. Ooh. And then from what is learned helplessness, it took me to how does racism affect mental health?
So that's a lot.
When we think about the depths and all that you're saying, and we're trying to understand why, biopic parents are being so harsh, like stress of being a parent in today's society, with all that they personally have to deal with, and no one cared about, well, if it's generation, no one cared about their feelings. You have to be tough. I know people, parents that, even including my own, like, I love you was a foreign word. A hug was a foreign thing. You got the kids today, I got to go to work. And when we're talking about gentle parenting, I never knew nothing of a timeout. What is a timeout?
Listen,
what is I promise you, I like when I talk about beatings, and when and it's crazy because I can, like, a lot of people can't watch historical movies about slavery. I find it easily relatable to what I experienced in my abuse when I watch those movies. And that should tell you something.
That's probably because that's where whipping or whoopings, that's where that came from, because they were taught once again, we're taught, like I said, okay, so that intergenerational trauma is intersectional. It's so many different pieces. And I know you don't have all day to talk about all the pieces, but this is an interesting conversation. But that's literally where whipping came from, because they said, hey, I'm gonna beat these people until they do what I tell them to do, how they do it. And then we started doing that to our kids. So we was like, okay, I'm gonna whoop them because they didn't wash the dishes, or I'm gonna whoop them because they went to school and didn't make good grades. You didn't call the teacher. You didn't ask why they didn't understand the math. You don't even know how to do the math. All you know is they went to school and they failed the test, and now they getting a whooping. That did not help little Timmy learn math. And so we have to change some of this, because one, a lot of times that is how our kids come into the system, and then we got to deal with a whole nother slew of problems. But it's taught our kids nothing, and little Timmy is still,
and it's corrupted love. It's corrupted love as a word and as a thing for these individuals. I remember you being a young person and getting whooped and then being told, I whooped you because I love you. So now I'm relating pain to love. I'm relating that this is something that I'm supposed to experience in relationships.
Right.
This is something I'm supposed to experience in life. So like when we talk about how these things truly affect, kids, it's deep.
It is. And those are the messages that we're giving to them. And I say we as a whole, sometimes these things apply to me specifically, sometimes they don't. So I'm not saying anybody individual. I'm not saying I do these, and I'm not saying that I don't do them. But what I'm saying is that I know more, and that I've learned more, and I've changed some of the behaviors, but I'm surely never going to be a perfect parent. But, I'm going to do what I do, and I'm going to trial and error, because these kids did not come with an instruction manual. So yeah, that, and like you were saying, now people equate love with that physical abuse or that verbal abuse. Like, there are people that I'm like, y'all don't know how to respond to you unless I talk to you crazy, and I don't want to talk to you crazy because I'm not at that point in my life. Like, I don't want to say cuss words at you. I just want to have a conversation, and conversations don't necessarily mean argument. So it's definitely, like you said earlier, for lack of a better term, it's crazy. It is, because there's so much that we have to undo.
So I'm gonna ask you now, and I know this is kind of like a broad question, because yet there's more to uncover in the depths of how and all the roots that it's affecting. But we got a starting point, at least. Mm-hmm. By understanding what intergenerational trauma is, understanding all the different trickles from that. How do we start to do better with our child welfare system and community resources to help alleviate this crisis? Because if we don't, we're going to continue to see the statistics being more Black people, more BIPOC people in the system, and that's really our norm right now.
Yeah. It is, because, unfortunately, we know about that disproportionality. We're disproportionate in a lot of populations, but there is no reason why we should make up, most of the child welfare system when we don't make up most of the population.
Yeah. Just take one moment here to get some things straightened out. So if y'all hear like a little pause, it's all right,
Yeah, so just kind of knowing and understanding that people are coming from this background. A lot of times whenever they're working with caseworkers, first of all, we're already coming with, I'm going to say BIPOC, people of color. A lot of times we're already coming with the mindset of, hey, these people aren't here to help me. If they were here to help me, these statistics wouldn't look like that. And that may or may not be true. There are some people who do have good intentions. But if I'm already coming with that mindset, if we're already coming with that mindset, sometimes that is our reality. But I think that our system, we say that we're trauma informed, but we just know when they say trauma informed, and I say this as somebody who's trained for the child welfare system, it's more so we're just going to talk about trauma. We're going to talk about acute trauma, and we're going to talk about chronic trauma, but we're not talking about how that trauma has really, really impacted the families. And we're just literally sometimes giving them a checklist. Hey, you have 12 months of this case, and you may have a 6-month extension depending on what the judge says, but I need you to do A, B, C, D, and E. You got to do this whole laundry list of things to get your kids back. Never mind, you got to go to work. Your kids got to go to school. Your kids are probably acting up because this is another traumatic experience. You're now depressed because this is another traumatic experience. And we just want you to do all this stuff. We don't know how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, as long as you do it, or you're not going to get your kids back. Mm-hmm. And so literally working with and partnering with parents to establish new behavioral patterns.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's anybody else's job to raise these parents, but what I'm saying is you may have to do some parenting of the parents and show them new parenting skills. And one of the issues with a lot of parenting classes, in all honesty, is that they teach you how to parent toddlers, and that does absolutely nothing for me and my 14-year-old, who I have to try to convince to not wear a hoodie when it's 100 degrees and it's 30 degrees outside and she want to wear a short sleeve shirt. So that is a reality right now that I'm experiencing as a parent. Like, ma'am, you had on a hoodie in August and it's December, girl, you got a short sleeve shirt, what's going on? But but really working with the parents, working with the parents, genuinely working with the parents, making sure that the parenting classes and any other type of services that you refer them to are actually beneficial. A lot of times they just reading off of a list of providers. Okay, well, you can go over here to the Baptist church on this corner and they have A, B, C, D, and E. You haven't looked at them. You haven't even seen what it's like for them to work with parents. And one of the things that I would do is a lot of times I would go like as an undercover person, like you don't even have to know that I'm Felisha, the case manager or the trainer. I'm going to go to one of these service providers and I'm gonna act like I'm somebody who needs service. And I want to see how they treat me, because that's probably how they're treating your clients that you're referring to them. And now you know why Sally doesn't want to go over here, because they treated her bad. But you worried about why Sally didn't come over here and complete these services, but you don't have firsthand experiences because as a professional, they don't treat me the same way that they're going to treat my clients.
Mm-hmm.
So making sure that we are providing adequate services, making sure that we are vetting our providers, looking for that behavioral change. Because it's one thing for me to say, hey, I went to 12, addiction and rehab classes, but how has my behavior changed? It's one thing for me to say I went to, 6 therapy sessions, but if I were never motivated to go to therapy in the first place, it's not going to work. So, just looking at the overall ways that we care for the parents, because if not, we're going to have their kids have already experienced trauma within the household. They've experienced trauma with being removed. And now they're also navigating completely new relationships with foster parents and group homes and other teenagers or even other kids. And how do I live amongst these people? So the easiest way is to work with our families, help them to build better parental support systems, help them to get better parental behaviors so that they can pass those things on to their children.
Definitely. I want to switch gears, to something that is kind of a question, but kind of not like a statement. I just want to get your, feel on it. So for the amount of youth that we have in care that are considered BIPOC, there's not a equivalent to foster homes. So say for instance, half of those individuals, it was a that they ended up in the system due to very severe circumstances. And we said the other half due to poverty or false sense of neglect, I like to say. But for those individuals that it was inevitable for them to enter in the system, now they go into the system and a small percentage actually get with another BIPOC family that can help preserve and teach them things about society and their culture. The other half, they don't get that. So I'm interested in your input on the loss versus gain when those individuals get into the system. And unfortunately, if they're privileged to get into a foster home, because it ain't a lot out there, I'm interested to see the data behind it, but there's a lot, of individuals like myself that come in and like preteens or what have you, and then told completely at the door that you're not getting in the home. So now we're in congregate care. And even in these congregate care facilities, I think about culture, diversity, and what have you. Most of these congregate care facilities be in the middle of the boondocks, surrounded by cornfields, and I'm expected to know how to act as a Black man when I age out. So I'm interested in your take and all that. I know I said a lot, but what are your thoughts?
Somebody told me that sometimes I talk with sarcasm, but you're talking about in the boondocks in cornfields. I literally did have a placement. I live in Texas. I was in rural Texas, very rural Texas, that had cotton fields. And I was like, what in the world is this? Now, the placement that I did have, it did end up being an amazing place because I absolutely love my foster parents. But there's like a really big thing right now with transracial and transcultural adoption and foster care placements. We don't have very many people of color who are foster parents and or adoptive parents, and that causes people to lose a lot of their culture. That also causes a lot of issues within the home. And when I say home, I mean just even whether it's congregate care or whether it's an actual individual home, because of the different cultural differences. So literally things, our hair is very important to us. People not even understanding how to do our hair, people not understanding how we care for our skin, especially if it's a younger child who's not able to care for themselves at that point. But these older children sometimes don't even have the same supplies to be able to care for their hair and their skin, not even to wear the types of clothes that they want, because there's a cultural difference. And a lot of times it is a cultural shock. So that's a really big thing. That's actually a really big concern for me. And right now, what I'm kind of teetering with, because this was something I actually did a project on not too long ago, was, which one is going to be more important? Like right now in Texas, we have a thing where you try to hurry and find that child placement. What's going to be more important, a culturally matched placement or a culturally matched placement, or the first placement that comes available? Whenever we look at the United States and the child welfare system, it's actually against the law to determine a child's placement based on the race and ethnicity of the child and or of the placement, with the exception of children who fall under ICWA, which is the Indian Child Welfare Act. However, in other countries, and I only know this, like I said, because I did a homework project on it not too long ago. In other countries, they have to place children of color, and this is in Canada, UK, Australia, and New Zealand. They all have similar laws because they're actually all under the same reign, but they all have to place the children in a culturally matched. And if it's not the exact same culture, it has to be something that's similar. We don't have those laws. It's actually the opposite in the United States. So I know that there's a lot of people who were placed in non-culturally matched placements, and they're like, nah, I know nothing about my culture. Like, someone that I interviewed for my project, she was saying, I'm Mexican, but I have no connection even to my siblings. I don't speak Spanish. I'm not Catholic. I don't have any traditions. I didn't have any quinceañeras. She said, and when I was younger, it didn't register to me. But now that I'm an adult, she's like, I have no cultural connection. I just identify with the traditional white American culture because that's all I know. Like I say, for me, fortunately, I didn't go into the system until I was, 15. But with that being said, I do see how a lot of people have completely lost their culture. They don't know how to identify with people. They feel lost. They have no connection. They have no roots. And you're kind of like floating out there in the middle of nowhere. You don't identify with the culture that you look like, or with people who have similar physical features to you, and you don't identify with the people that you've lived with either. You feel kind of like an outsider.
Definitely. I couldn't have said it better myself, and it was the reason why, I brought that up, because, I'm really intrigued to understand, how other people, think and process these things. And sometimes, I'll be like thinking really hard, and there's so much stuff that is happening when you're advocating and doing this work in child welfare, and it can be mind blowing. Like, you sit there and be like, "Nah, I must be crazy," So I like, it's interesting when I hear other people, on the same wavelength and understanding that no, this is an issue, and it's something to be noted, because. Granted, even if the child says, I like this home and what have you, a teenager versus, a younger kid, let's say around 6, 7, don't know completely what they may be losing culturally until Absolutely. They have that experience as an older teen or as an adult, when they're come around other people within their culture, and it's all like a shell shock. When they, and that's, it's even happened to me, even though like didn't have like a total experience. Like, a lot of my experience was in congregate care, but even coming out of congregate care, like, I didn't realize how much things I missed out on culturally, because like life was kind of like paused. Like you were subjugated to what you could see on TV, what you could hear about the news, what and stuff like that. So when I got out, I was in a predominantly white community. The couple Black people that I did see, were more urbanized. So now I'm speaking in a different way. It's not cussing words after every language. So now I'm being related to, because my faith had grew really strong as a church boy. When I go to talk to, like I'm not a part. It was this separation that divided me from my own people, and I didn't understand it. And for me, I just wanted to be a part. Just wanted to, and it messed with me a lot as far as those next steps of finding identity and being my own independent individual. And I'll be intrigued to hear if anyone else, listening to this experience that as a lived experience person. But I wanted to uplift that because I think it's, something to be noted that's happening. I also, have a couple more questions.
Okay,
Mental
go
health
for it.
and self-care,
Okay.
they're a journey for everyone. Some people it's a little bit easier, they start young. Some people they like, nah, I don't mess with that. What has that experience been for you personally, but also within your work and understanding it for others?
Okay, so mental health for me. So actually, I get excited just because I know, like, because I know what I'm supposed to be doing and when I'm supposed to be doing it. Sometimes we need reminders, right? So earlier I talked about just even let's say parents are going to therapy. I'm a firm believer if you aren't interested in, or if you're not invested in therapy, it's not going to work for you because you're not ready and you're not prepared to go in and tackle these things. So when I came to the point that I was ready, man, I've accomplished a lot of things, but just going to therapy, like sometimes I just need clarity because once again, I don't have that same foster system, and I don't have that same support system. So I'm just like, you know what, let me go talk to this lady. And I specifically chose my therapist for her specific qualities. Like I wanted an older person. I wanted a Black woman because I needed some wisdom and guidance. Like I need an auntie to guide me, right? That also has some credentials that make sure that I'm not just out here doing whatever. But with that being said, that journey has been very good for me. I have worked in mental health. And so one of the things that I've done is I've taken some of the things that I've learned or some of the things that I've worked on with my clients, and incorporated those into my life, and then also incorporated things like that into my daughter's life, and even with my family. Like I know that working out, that's going to build my endorphins. So whenever I can, prior to me starting the job I have now, I used to work out most days because that's going to get my mind right. I'm going to be at peace in the morning. It's got a burden of energy that I know I can sleep at night and things like that. It lets me clear my thoughts. I'm not angry. I'm not upset. So I know what's going to work for me. That mental health journey is figuring out what works for you. That's a healthy coping skill. Because some people, you can have a coping skill, but it may not necessarily be a positive one. So figuring out what your healthy, positive coping skills are going to be and try to consistently do those things. Okay, so not necessarily working out to lose weight. I'm working out because that's what I love to do. I love working out. And because I know it's going to put me in a different mind space. I also know that whatever music I listen to. So I think that music is mood altering. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a sociologist by degree, and I study families. So if anybody from psychology wants to verify, I believe that music is mood altering. And so I choose what I listen to when I listen to it. So if I want to be in a relaxed mood, I listen to lo-fi music. When I'm working out, I listen to rap, to rock. I listen to trap music, whatever it is that can get me on that treadmill for that 30 minutes that I need to be there. And so, like I said, doing my music, finding things that I like to do. I also really love being in my own presence. Before a mom, before a professor, before a student, before a sister, I have to be true to me. And I really appreciate my own time to myself. Like there are times, where I'll be like, I'm not doing anything all weekend. So like I just accomplished some things last weekend. And I was like, you know what? I've done enough peopling for the next day or two. I'm just gonna be, I'm gonna be in my turtle shell, because I have to regain my energy and regroup so that I can get my mind right for all the other things or for anything else that I want to do. So that's kind of what I do for my mental health.
That people meter is real. Like I can't explain to people enough. Like it's not because to people who love and their life revolves around others, it comes off as you're self-isolating. And or comes off as something, but for me, it's like I need that moment to rejuvenate. I need that moment because a lot of my work revolves around people, from doing peer support to doing mentorship to doing advocacy to doing, policy work, all this and it's not just revolving around people, it revolves around tons of emotions because everything that I do, I'm uplifting other people's lived experience and my own. So I'm uplifting all that trauma back again to be able to explain. That's a lot to do, and then on the other end, you come home, socializing, but for me, I can't speak more than like having that moment for self. Like I love my time for self. I love my time where I can just, debrief, wind down. For me, ideally, it's a nice glass of wine, reading a nice book, listening to some. I like classical crossover music. Don't make fun of me, y'all in there, but I love it. Like you get me some Lindsey Sterling. She kind of like classical dubstep, and some other people, nothing but string black violins. I love it. It just is really relaxing and it helps me, process and wind down. But for others, that's not it, and I don't know. Like that's your cup of tea. My cup of tea, I know I have a people meter. I can be out socializing. That people meter hits its peak. Whoever rode with me, it's time to go. And you see me walking towards the door. You better come on if you want to ride. But it just like I've learned to do that as a boundary too, because I know like in order to keep doing what I'm doing, I have to set boundaries and standards for me to be able to rejuvenate, for me to be able to be responsible. Because if I don't, it's inevitable for me to have a burnout.
Absolutely. And even I guess for the people that do the work that we do. So I'll say one thing about me. I'm actually mostly introverted. And so people sometimes who see me outside or if they see me at a conference, like I'm going to do good. I'm going to stand up there. I'm going to kill it. And I'm going to do amazing. But afterwards, like I said, that adrenaline comes down and like my whole body, my whole mind is like gone. So, it's kind of like, oh, she didn't talk to us or she didn't speak to me. I'm regrouping and getting myself together because I just gave all of my time, all of my energy, or I probably spoke about something that was traumatic. So I have to regroup. I have to get my life together, just even in this moment. And so, like you said, like I said, I had a really big accomplishment last week. And, I was there at 6:30 and I was like, look, it's 10:30. I got to go. and so somebody, they're like, hey, you forgot your gift. Girl, what time did they give out gifts? Because I was gone at 10:30. Like, so, and not that I didn't want to celebrate with everyone else, but it was, just a lot of things. And so, like you said, that self-preservation, I can't continue to go. I can't continue to give, whether it's the foster care community, the mental health community, to work. I can't give to any of that. And I should not be giving to all of that if I don't have myself. And that goes back to all the stuff that we say is learned behavior. I think, a few years ago, I learned in my own personal journey, I'm not finna glamorize being exhausted. Yeah. Whether it's mentally exhausted, physically, emotionally, no. I'm going to set aside breaks. I'm going to give time to what I can. But I'm also going to set aside time for me to be just with me. Like you said, if it's that glass of wine, if it's that cup of tea, if it's what I like watching cartoons because, I work in really tough situations. and I don't want to watch anything that's traumatic. I'm going to put it on Teen Titans, or I'm going to put it on SpongeBob, and something that's not that serious, that can help me wind down and get in the correct mental space for me.
Yeah, no, like I can relate. I can relate, you know. For this is gonna be talking about myself, but like I have my level of, if I'm having a really bad day, or you know, just things are going crazy, you know, I like to watch something Disney-ish, I like to call it.
Lighthearted.
Yeah,
It doesn't really matter.
I turn on some, and this is some like way Rocket Power, you know, some Franklin, some Little Bear,
Yes.
you know, like, because I want it to be as remedial but as happy and uplifting as possible, you know. Yeah, and it's cool because, you know, even in those shows they talk about conflicts and stuff like that, but it's very lighthearted. But yeah, you talked about mental health, you talked about your journey and that, you know, mental health is something different, you know, and so many different communities, you know. I know, you know, a lot of stuff has happened recently between men's mental health and, you know, BIPOC, you know, cultural, you know, the stigmas between, you know, going to see therapy, you know, the balance between therapy and religion, you know, all these different things, you know. I'm gonna say this, like, I don't have all the answers. I don't think anyone has all the answers, but one thing I would say is, you know, if what you're doing is not working, try something else.
Absolutely.
In my experience, I remember going and being in congregate care, and this is on my juvenile side. I would come back home, and my family did not change. Like, I did the group sessions, the therapy sessions, all that, the focus up, all, you know, all those different things they told me to do to cope in those things, to not use my fists, you know, not, you know, be angry, all this thing. It would come home and family started arguing, start, you know, tripping out again. Hey, let's call a group session. Let's talk about it, y'all. And I got called every cussing word in the book, because what is you talking about? A group session. You know, I remember one distinct experience where one of my family members was like, "You better take that white stuff on," you know. Like, and I, like, at that point it kind of set back with me, because I'm like, how do I supposed to take this stuff serious on my end if my family not? So it was really a crossing bridge for myself, where I had to differentiate and be like, is it really working for me and they just not doing the work themselves, or is this stuff just a whole bunch of whatever, you know?
That's likely what happened, though. That's probably what did happen, because, you know, and this is no shade to anybody that is my family, but it's very different when I've put in the work. I think earlier, like I said, you know, there are some people that, unless you're talking to them crazy, they don't get it. And I'm like, I don't want to say cuss words to you. I just want to tell you that this is my boundary, and I'm not moving from this boundary, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be an argument. And so that's actually what happened. If you were putting in the work and you didn't get the results, and I think that for me, like, I know that I've already broken chains, but I didn't break those chains for everyone else. But it's not my responsibility to.
Right.
That's really kind of what a lot of my things have come to is, hey, Felisha, you can, I know that you're working on this intergenerational trauma, but that's for you and your daughter. Anybody else, they can, you know, they can do whatever it is that they want to do, or however they need to heal, because your healing journey is for you. I can't heal for everybody else. And it's not necessarily my job to repair all of that. Because I know that there are some people that feel obligated to, like, I have to be the one to fix all this. And no, what I'm learning is, hey, we can work together, we can partner together. If you're interested in this, and if you're open to trying these things, you know, it's gonna be trial and error. But if not, it's just gonna stay the same. But I have to also be okay with letting you let it be the same for you. It's not going to be the same for me.
Right.
You still gonna be on square one and I'm gonna be on square 10, whether that's in life or whether that's in mental health or whether that's in whatever that's in. But I have to be comfortable with me continuing to walk forward and not necessarily leaving other people behind, but not necessarily engaging in whatever it is. Like you said, I'm coming and I'm working and I'm learning these therapeutic techniques and I'm trying it and it's not working. That's because they didn't want it to work.
Definitely.
Or so.
Yeah, and I mentioned that because, it was definitely my experience, in and out of program. Like I would go do the work and then, they would trip out and be the same, my behavior would decline, and at some point I realized that interchanging from the JJ system to the foster care system and made a switch in myself, and set some boundaries. But that's something that I want to mention from my personal story, that I know I'm not the only one that experiences that. If there is dysfunctionality where, an individual is coming back in and out of programs, what you would call repeat offending, but I feel like it's more to that story when people repeat offend. Like something that's happening in the home, like something is happening, within the parenting, and maybe if there's more resources that we don't have to send them to another program, and then argue about the funds of sending that person. But I think if more resources was given to my family, to deal with their stuff. So when I did re-enter back with my family, that's probably not the right word, but come back to my family, it worked. The issue was I came into my family, I did the therapy, worked on my anger, worked on being argumentative, worked on, not being physical, worked on the trauma of being physically and sexually and emotionally and verbally abused, would come home, the same thing was happening. No one worked on the home. No one worked on the environment. It was put off on me as a child to make everybody better. So if I go, they assume that everything is going to be good at the home. So when I come back, I did my program. I successfully completed it. I'm expected to be that difference, that shift in generations of messed up stuff as just one individual. So that's just some food for thought for people out there listening. If you're working in this field, and you're seeing that repeated pattern, maybe offering family therapy while the person is completing, their program or what have you. Not saying that you may get extreme results, but at some point we have to look at the family as a whole, not just on the foster care side, but on the juvenile side as well. I would even go as far as saying on the criminal justice side, like, when people are entering into these systems, what are we doing to make sure that they integrate back into society successfully? What are we doing to make sure that the environment that they integrate in is different? Because environment most times tends to be the key to what is causing these individuals to do whichever, and for adults that may be, well, I live around drugs and all this other stuff and I can't find a job, so I'm gonna sell drugs. So what are we doing to ensure that when a person comes out that they can integrate into a stable housing environment, not just for themselves but for their family, and to be able to provide?
Absolutely. That's a part of, just like we said, all of these things are intertwined. Like that's a part of all of those cycles, that recidivation cycle. You can't, you can't continuously take me out, put me in, take me out, put me in, and expect things to be, things to be different. You have to look at the overall environment of where I'm coming from and how that has changed, because if I'm going back to the same thing, it's probably going to be the same thing. And sometimes we do have to make changes to that overall environment. If you don't see that actual, like I said, that behavioral change, nothing's going to change. It's still going to be the same exact thing. It's either going to be the same exact thing or something similar, until something is that catalyst to put a stop to it. Like there has to be some mitigating factor. For some people that's prison, some people that's death. Sometimes it's the death of a loved one. Sometimes it's moving away. So there does have to be that. And, you know, even like you said, you were the person that was carrying the torch. You were the person that was changing, and the responsibility was kind of placed on you. Hey, you're the healed one, so you got to go and come and heal everybody else. And unfortunately, I'll say this, sometimes that happens in our community. It's like, oh, well, this person is doing good. They're doing good mentally, emotionally, financially. They got to come back and fix everybody. No,
Yeah.
if we all want to be doing good, we all have to do the work. Like, I can't carry the team by myself. And I'm not going to make any more sports references because I'm terrible at them, but I really can't, you know, carry the team by myself. And so it's just more so of, how do we all work together? Like I said, if y'all want to work together, we can work together to create something amazing and beautiful. But if not, then I can continue to create what's amazing and beautiful for me.
Definitely. And as I get to my last questions, I'm going to say this last thing on this specific subject. It's not like we don't have the proof. Because when you look into foster homes, or, you know, just specific counties of removals, when you look into specific counties of people going into juvenile, when you look into specific counties of individuals going into jail, you know, they come from the same neighborhood.
Yep, the maps overlap. Even whenever you look at the education, they overlap. You can put them one on top of the other, and it's like the same thing. So it's that disproportionality across the board that's intersectional.
Man, I couldn't tell you enough how many times. Oh yeah, you from what's the name? Yeah, I'm from there too. Oh, so you experience some crazy stuff, and ain't nobody to say, well, we need to get into that community. We need to help this community uplift itself, be better. We need to help provide better parenting resources. We need to help provide better economic and equity within this community, economic opportunity. You know, we need to help change this environment from being a food desert. You know, like we're so focused. And I was reading a book when I was I was locked up. I was doing my time in foster care. It was by Reverend Ron. And one of the quotes that was in his book was, when we focus on the problem only gets bigger. But when we focus on the solution, we get closer to the solution. And don't quote me on it, may have been said differently. This was years ago. But it's not that we forget the problem, because we know it. You know, we validate the problem, we validate the feelings, we validate the emotions. But we've so past the point of, okay, this is a problem. We've had the conversations, we've had the committees, we had the advisory committees, we had the floor, we had the hearings. And now we're at the place where, okay, let's roll out these pilot programs, these solutions, that put some funds towards, you know, helping these people out, you know, and that's the issue. You know, it's actually, you know, putting the money where our mouth is, and that's a conversation for another day. Because, you know, yeah. I don't understand paying, you know, $80,000 for a youth to be locked up, but not wanting to pay $80,000 or less for them to stay with their family, you know, and to get resources. Absolutely. And become a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen.
Yep. And, you know, the unfortunate thing is that, you know, whenever we look at communities, there are people who are doing the work, but most of the time it's like on an individual level, and it's really big a strength in numbers. And a lot of times, like, you know, you see the aunties and the grandmas, you know, and grandpas and uncles in the community doing the work, but there's no agencies and organizations partnering with them to make it better, the overall community. And there are only one or two people, sometimes maybe 5 or 10 or 15 people. They can't do it all by themselves. Like you said, we go into the legislature, we're talking on the floor, y'all giving money to everything but the actual foundation in the first place. So y'all are putting money into the prison systems. How about we put money into preventing the prison system? How about we put money into these education where kids have tools and resources? If my daughter's school has only online textbooks, okay, then let's put access to all of them having computers, you know, things like that. Because even within our school system, we have programs of choice, but some of the choices aren't that good, in all honesty. And then sometimes parents don't even know that they have a choice and that the school districts are open and you can send your kids to any of these districts in the area and they'll provide transportation for free.
Yeah.
So it's so much stuff. A lot of, once again, this is not to say that any of our parents are perfect and they should be forgiven for everything. That's not what I'm saying at all. Absolutely not. What I'm saying is, as a parent, I know it's hard. It's so much information. And then as a person who's working through trauma, I also kind of have to be understanding too. So yeah, it's so much.
It's crazy, you know, because years ago, you know, starting out in this whole working on myself, I was against like any being of, oh, well, my parents, they should have done, you know, this, that, you know, of understanding. You know, and a lot of us start out that way. But when you start to work on yourself and recover from your trauma and you start to heal, you start to understand that there's more pieces to the puzzle. You know, and when you understand that there's more pieces to the puzzle, you don't have to agree with the behaviors or actions that happened, but you can understand that the roots were a little bit deeper than what you can see. And unfortunately, you know, it could be the same for yourself. You know, if you don't change certain things and what you have saw or what has happened to you, you can repeat the process, you know? So in understanding all of that, you have no choice but to give, you know, somewhat of empathy because you know that there was a lack. You know, somewhere the ball had been dropped, you know, with my mom or my dad. You know, somewhere the ball was dropped with my grandma and my granddad. Somewhere the ball was dropped, you know, with my great grandma and my great granddad, you know, and it goes on and on and on, you know, until we get to a historical event that happens, you know. And for me, I explained this story before, you know, my grandparents came up here to work for GM from the South. You know, a lot of people came up to Detroit, you know, a lot of people did that, you know, and they was working. When I say they was working, working. They wasn't home. Like, you know, and the older siblings took care of the younger siblings, you know, and I think about all the moments of parenting that, you know, you're needing someone who's a little bit more tactic, a little bit more strategic, and how to be nurturing, how to be caring, you know, how to, you know, I love you and stuff like that. And I think about when I hear how my aunts and my uncles and my mom and, you know, my dad were raised, I hear that they didn't get that all the time. I hear that they had to do what they had to do. You know, I hear that, you know, and then somebody else has heard this. Well, when I start to talk about can I get a ride to school, and my parents gonna tell me, well, back in my day, we had to walk and stuff like that. That doesn't mean I had to experience that same trauma.
Right. That just because it happened to you don't mean it was okay.
You know, so and I just think about all those things. So if I can leave anything with you guys in this whole conversation, you know, just think about all that we talked about and just reflect on it, you know. And I'm not leaning one way or another, but you know, there's certain things that we know as facts that is happening and that can't be ignored, you know. Last couple questions. What advice would you like to leave here today?
Oh, that's hard. So I think that my word for advice would be I guess to kind of rewrite your own journey, rewrite your own story. Because this is a never-ending journey until it ends. And so, like I said, my foster care story, most of my stuff happened after I came from foster care, a lot of things that I learned. And so what are you taking with you on your journey? What are you packing with you in your mental scrapbook? What lessons are you learning? And literally sometimes take those things that, hey, this is a lesson and this is how I navigate differently. This is how I communicate differently. This is how I work with others, or this is how I don't work with others. These are the relationships that I want to keep. So I'd say just figure out what your path is going to be and what your lessons are going to be along that journey. And guess what? If that journey ain't going the way that you want it to, then you put that GPS on and you reroute. Okay.
I love it. I love it. And lastly, what comments would you like to leave? And this space is for, if you have a book, a rap song, an album, whatever, you know, audible, you know, you want to drop, how people can stay connected to you, or what have you, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, so I do have some things that I am working on. Hopefully I get them knocked out in 2023. But in 2021, I did publish a journal on Amazon. It's called the Resilience Journal by Felisha Burleson. And it's actually a bunch of activities for self-care and mental health. And then there's actual journaling pages. So I have that. I am going to be coming out with some other things, like I said, in 2023. But I don't want to speak too soon because just my luck, it won't happen. I'm going to make it happen, but I'll give you maybe an update whenever I come up with those products and programs and services, because I'm trying to impact the lives of people, whether it's through something that's written, whether it's through a service, whether it's through a group, just figuring out how I can better utilize my time to help other people.
Definitely. Well, it's truly been a privilege and an honor to have you on. I'm sure this won't be the last time we have conversations. But you know, without further ado, you know, guys, this is episode 30. You know, we trickling down. I Lord, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I was like, are you frozen or am I?
I don't know what happened. Where did I cut off at?
You said we're trickling down.
Okay, so yeah, we're trickling down, you know, and I know a lot of things in this episode could be potentially triggering. So I just ask you guys, you know, take some time to center yourself, do some mindfulness exercises or some self-care before you go do anything else after listening to this. You know, bring yourself back to baseline. If it's something that, you know, is a little bit heavy and promote push up some things that you know didn't know you experienced or what have you. Feel free to reach out to me. I would love to hook you up with some resources, you know, to get help or, you know, just to talk to you about, you know, foster care recovery and starting that up for yourself and my journey and, you know, what that process may look like for yourself if you want that. Also, it's, you know, cold and flu season out there. Winter is upon us. You know, COVID is still out there. Please take care of yourself. You know, please, you know, get that hand sanitizer, get them tissues, get the masks. You know, put a coat on if you need to. You know, if people like me, I'm warm blooded. Like I'm hot. It's like so. Like most times, I am that individual. Which is why I was laughing earlier. That comes outside in a t-shirt when it's snowing. when it's snowing. Or what have you, because I be hot. But you know, please take care of yourself on a more serious note. A lot of stuff has happened in the past with COVID, so live like, you know, we've learned some lessons. You know, let's take care of each other. You know, you do what we need to do to be safe, because we're all a part of this wonderful this big village, and you know, it takes one of us, you know, to help the other, and it helps us all. So, with that being said, this has been Resilient Voices and Beyond, episode 30 of season 2. I hope you guys have a good morning, good night, good whatever you're listening to this. Thank you, and talk to you guys soon.